3 months. That's how long it took for my life to become something I barely recognized. 3 months ago, I was sitting in a restaurant while my ex-boyfriend laughed in my face. "You'll never find better than me." At the time, I almost believed him. But life has a strange sense of humor. Because 3 weeks after that breakup, Daniel stood inside the most luxurious ballroom in Seoul and watched the most powerful man in the city take my hand. Minj, the man people whispered about, the man businessmen feared, the man the underground world called a shadow of Seoul. And somehow, he had chosen to stand beside me. Since that night, everything had changed. My career exploded. Companies that once ignored my emails were suddenly asking for meetings. My designs appeared in magazines. My name was mentioned in business articles. And the tiny apartment I once struggled to pay for had been replaced by something I never imagined, a penthouse overlooking the Han River. But power has a strange side effect. It attracts enemies. And unfortunately for me, one of those enemies already hated me. Daniel, my ex-boyfriend. And Daniel wasn't the kind of man who accepted defeat. He was the kind of man who needed revenge. The man who couldn't accept loss. Across the city in Gangnam, inside a tall glass office building, Daniel stared at a magazine article glowing on his laptop screen. The headline read, "Rising creative star behind Seoul's most exclusive gala." And below it was my photo. Daniel clenched his jaw. The image showed me smiling beside a stage display. Behind me were the elegant visuals I had designed for Charity Gala. The same gala where Minj had publicly praised my work. Daniel slammed his laptop shut. "That should have been me," he muttered. 3 months earlier, he had walked away from me like I was nothing. Now, everywhere he went, people were talking about the girl he dumped. At networking events. At work. Even his boss had asked about it. "You used to date her, right?" That simple question had burned his pride, because suddenly Daniel realized something humiliating. The woman he mocked for being unimpressive was now becoming more successful than him. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was Minj. Daniel had spent weeks researching that name. At first, he assumed Minj was just another rich businessman. But the deeper he looked, the darker the truth became. Shipping companies, private security firms, investment groups, luxury hotels. But beneath those legal businesses, there were whispers, illegal trade routes, underground organizations, political influence, people disappearing. The name Minj didn't just command respect, it inspired fear. Daniel leaned back in his chair. A rational person would have stopped there. A rational person would have realized it was dangerous to provoke someone like that. But Daniel wasn't rational anymore. His pride had been shattered. And wounded pride can make people incredibly stupid. He opened his laptop again. This time he wasn't looking at my article. He was writing an email, a very specific email. One that would send rumors into the design industry. Accusations. Claims that my work was stolen. That my success wasn't real. That the woman everyone was praising was actually a fraud. Daniel pressed send and smiled. "If I can't win," he whispered, "then neither can you." The new life. Meanwhile, my life looked completely different. The penthouse balcony overlooked the glowing lights of Seoul. The Han River shimmered below like a ribbon of gold. I was sitting at a small outdoor table with a cup of tea when Minj stepped outside. He had changed out of his usual suit and was wearing a simple black shirt. Even dressed casually, he looked intimidating. There was something about Minj's presence that naturally commanded attention. But right now, he seemed unusually quiet. "You're thinking again," I said. He glanced at me. "You notice everything." I smiled slightly. It's part of being a designer. For a moment, we watched the city together in silence. Then he spoke again. "Your ex hasn't given up." My stomach tightened. "You think Daniel will try something?" Minj didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took out his phone and handed it to me. "Look." I frowned and read the screen. It was an online article, but not a positive one. The headline made my heart drop. Designer Maya Park accused of stealing creative work. My chest tightened. "That's not true," I said quickly. "I know, but someone wants people to believe it is." I scrolled through the article. Anonymous sources, unverified accusations, claims that my designs had been copied from smaller artists. None of it had proof, but the damage was already starting, because rumors spread faster than truth. I looked up slowly. Daniel. Minj didn't answer, but the silence confirmed it. Of course it was Daniel. He wasn't trying to win me back. He wanted revenge. And in his mind, destroying my reputation would restore his pride. I placed the phone down slowly. What happens now? Minj leaned against the balcony railing. His expression remained calm. Too calm. Now, he said quietly, we see how far he's willing to go. Something in his voice made a chill run down my spine, because Minj wasn't the type of man who reacted emotionally. He calculated, he observed, and when he acted, it was usually final, a dangerous mistake. The next morning, the rumors spread faster. 2 blogs reposted the accusations. Then a design forum picked up the story. Soon, people in the industry were whispering. My phone buzzed constantly. Messages from co-workers. Questions from clients. Confused emails asking if the accusations were true. I felt my chest tighten as I read them. 3 months of hard work. And everything could collapse because of one jealous man. But Minj remained calm. Too calm. That evening he returned from a meeting and placed a small folder on the table. What's that? I asked. Information. I opened it. Inside were documents. Screenshots. Email records. Proof that the rumor campaign had started from a private account linked to Daniel's office network. My eyes widened. You already found this? Minj nodded. It wasn't difficult. I looked at him. What are you going to do? For a moment he didn't answer. Then he said something quietly. The same thing I always do. And what is that? Minj's eyes turned cold. I end problems. A chill ran down my spine, because suddenly I realized something. Daniel thought he was attacking me, but in reality, he had just provoked someone far more dangerous. And Minj was not a man people attack twice. The calm before the storm. Across the city, Daniel sat in a luxury bar celebrating with 2 co-workers. See, he said smugly. It didn't take long. One co-worker frowned. You sure that was smart? Daniel scoffed. It's just rumors. The co-worker leaned closer. Yeah, but rumors about someone connected to Minj? Daniel waved his hand dismissively. That guy's just some rich businessman. His co-worker shook his head slowly. You really should research him. Daniel laughed, but at that exact moment, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered casually. Hello. A calm voice spoke on the other end. Daniel Kim. His smile faded slightly. Yes. The voice continued. Minj would like to meet you. Daniel's stomach dropped, because suddenly the rumors didn't feel like a game anymore. Daniel stared at his phone long after call ended. The bar around him was still loud. Music, laughter, glasses clinking. But Daniel barely heard any of it. His co-worker leaned across the table. Who was that? Daniel swallowed. Someone asking for a meeting. Who? Daniel hesitated. Then he said the name quietly. Minj. Both co-workers went silent immediately. One of them slowly put his drink down. You're joking. Daniel forced a laugh. It's probably nothing. But his voice lacked confidence. The other co-worker leaned closer. You should not go. Daniel frowned. Why? His co-worker stared at him like the answer was obvious. Because people don't get invited to meet Minj. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. What does that mean? The co-worker lowered his voice. It means he usually calls people when something is already decided. A cold feeling spread through Daniel's chest, but pride quickly pushed it away. He's just a businessman. His co-worker shook his head. No, he's not. But Daniel had already made up his mind. If he refused a meeting, it would look like fear. And Daniel hated looking weak more than anything. So he finished his drink, stood up, and said the words that would soon feel like the worst decision of his life. I'll go. The building. The meeting address arrived 30 minutes later. It wasn't a restaurant. It wasn't an office building. It was a private tower overlooking the Han River, the kind of place owned by billionaires and politicians. Daniel arrived the next evening. The building lobby was quiet, almost too quiet. Marble floors, tall glass windows, security guards standing perfectly still. Daniel walked toward the reception desk. "I have a meeting," he said. The receptionist looked at her screen, then nodded politely. "Mr. Kim, please go to the private elevator." Daniel blinked. "You already know who I am?" She smiled slightly. "Of course." That answer didn't comfort him. If anything, it made him more nervous. The private elevator doors slid open silently. Daniel stepped inside. As the doors closed, he suddenly realized something strange. There were no buttons, only one floor available. Penthouse. The elevator moved upward smoothly. Daniel's reflection stared back at him in the mirrored walls. And for the first time since starting the rumor campaign, he felt something unfamiliar. Fear. The penthouse. The elevator doors opened slowly. A quiet hallway stretched ahead. Soft lighting. Minimal decoration. Two men in black suits stood near the entrance of a large living area. Bodyguards. Daniel immediately recognized the type. Their posture, their silence, their watchful eyes. One of them gestured toward the room. "Mr. Kim, this way." Daniel walked forward. Every step felt heavier than the last. Inside the penthouse, the view of Seoul was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the glowing city skyline. But Daniel barely noticed, because sitting calmly on a sofa near the window was Minj. The man looked exactly like Daniel remembered from the gala. Calm, elegant, dangerously composed. Minj slowly set down the glass of whiskey in his hand. Then he looked up. His eyes met Daniel's. And suddenly the room felt colder. "Mr. Kim," Minj said calmly. Daniel forced a smile. "Good evening." Minj gestured toward a chair. "Sit." It wasn't a request. Daniel sat. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Minj simply studied him, not aggressively, just quietly observing. Finally, Daniel cleared his throat. "You wanted to see me?" Minj nodded slightly. "Yes." Then he reached for a thin folder on the table and placed it in front of Daniel. "Please look." Daniel opened it. Inside were printed screenshots, emails, messages, server logs. His stomach dropped because he immediately recognized them. They were all connected to the rumor campaign against Maya. Daniel tried to keep his expression neutral. "I'm not sure what this is." Minj watched him carefully. "You are a finance professional, correct?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes." "Then you understand evidence." Daniel stayed silent. Minj continued calmly. "These records show that the rumor articles accusing Maya of stealing design work originated from your office network." Daniel felt sweat forming on the back of his neck. "That doesn't prove anything." Minj tilted his head slightly. "No." Daniel forced confidence into his voice. "Anyone could have used that network." Minj leaned back in his chair. For a moment, he looked almost amused. "You're right." Daniel relaxed slightly. Then Minj added quietly, "But only one person wrote the email." Daniel's heartbeat quickened. Minj slid another paper across the table. A printed email. The exact message Daniel had sent to the blog. Daniel stared at it, speechless. Minj spoke again. "You're not very careful." Daniel's confidence cracked. "You can't prove I sent that." Minj shrugged. "I don't need to." The calmness in his voice made Daniel uneasy. "What do you mean?" Minj looked out at the city lights for a moment. Then he turned back. "You made a mistake." Daniel swallowed. "What mistake?" Minj's eyes grew colder. "You believe this was a fight between you and Maya." The silence in the room became heavy. Minj continued softly. "But it isn't." Daniel felt his throat go dry. Minj leaned slightly forward. "When you attack someone under my protection," his voice remained calm, "you are attacking me." Daniel's heart pounded. He tried to speak confidently again. "Are you threatening me?" Minj looked at him with mild curiosity. "No." Another pause. Then he said something even more unsettling. I'm explaining reality. The offer. Minj stood up slowly. He walked toward the window, overlooking the river. His voice remained calm. You have two options. Daniel stayed frozen in his chair. What options? Minj spoke without turning around. First option. He raised one finger. You publicly admit the accusations were false. Daniel's stomach tightened. You post a statement explaining the rumors came from you. He raised a second finger. Second option. Daniel waited. Minj finally turned back toward him, and I saw the problem myself. Daniel forced a laugh. You think you can scare me? Minj's expression didn't change. I think you misunderstand something. Daniel frowned. What? Minj walked closer. The bodyguards remained completely silent behind him. I am not trying to scare you. His voice dropped slightly. I am trying to give you mercy. The word mercy echoed in the room. Daniel suddenly realized something terrifying. Minj wasn't angry. He was calm, and calm men with power were far more dangerous than angry ones. Daniel stood up quickly. I'll think about it. Minj nodded once. That would be wise. Daniel turned toward the elevator, but just before leaving, Minj spoke one last time. Mr. Kim. Daniel stopped. Yes. Minj's voice was quiet. Next time you decide to destroy someone's life. A pause. Make sure they are not standing beside me. Daniel walked into the elevator without responding, but as the doors closed, his hands were shaking, because deep down, he finally understood something. He had started a fight with the wrong man. Meanwhile, back at the penthouse balcony, Maya watched the city lights quietly. Minj returned a few minutes later. She looked up. How did it go? Minj poured himself another drink. He has a choice now. Maya frowned. What kind of choice? Minj looked out across the skyline. Whether he ruins his own life. He took a slow sip. Or I'd do it for him. Daniel barely slept that night. The meeting with Kong Minj replayed in his mind again and again. The calm voice, the cold eyes, the folder full of evidence, and the final warning. Make sure they are not standing beside me. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed staring at the city skyline outside his apartment window. Part of him knew what he should do. He should write the statement. Admit the rumors were false. And everything before it became worse. But Daniel's pride refused. Because admitting the truth meant admitting something else. That Maya had won. And Daniel hated losing more than anything. So instead of backing down, he doubled down. A more dangerous plan. The next morning, Daniel walked into his office early. His co-worker looked up from his desk. You look terrible. Daniel ignored the comment. He opened his laptop and started typing. Did you go to the meeting? The co-worker asked. Daniel nodded. And Daniel's fingers paused on the keyboard. It was nothing. His co-worker frowned. Nothing. Daniel leaned back in his chair. He tried to scare me. And Daniel smirked. I'm not scared. But his co-worker didn't look convinced. You should drop this, he said quietly. Daniel shook his head. No. Why not? Daniel's eyes hardened. Because he thinks he can control everything. The co-worker sighed. You're not fighting Maya anymore. Daniel turned toward him. Then who am I fighting? The co-worker answered with two words. Kong Minj. Daniel stared at him, then laughed. Let's see how powerful he really is. And with that, Daniel pressed send again. But this time the email was far worse. The second attack. Within hours, the internet exploded. The first rumor campaign had only questioned Maya's talent. This time, the accusations were far more serious. Articles suddenly appeared online claiming Maya had stolen money from design clients, fake screenshots, edited contracts, fabricated financial records. To anyone reading quickly, it looked convincing. The story spread rapidly across social media, design blogs, industry forums, even small news sites. By afternoon, the accusations were everywhere. At the penthouse, Maya's phone buzzed nonstop. She stared at the screen in disbelief. This can't be happening. Minj took the phone and scrolled through the articles. His expression remained calm. Too calm. He didn't listen, Maya said quietly. No, Minj replied. He didn't. Maya looked up nervously. What happens now? For a moment, Minj didn't answer. Then he spoke quietly. Now he learns. The investigation. Across the city, Daniel sat in his office watching the internet react. Comments were flooding the articles. Some people believed the accusations. Others defended Maya. But the chaos was exactly what Daniel wanted. Confusion, doubt, reputation damage. His phone buzzed. A message from his coworker. You went too far. Daniel smirked. Then another notification appeared. This one from his bank. His smile faded. The message read, Your corporate account access has been temporarily suspended. Daniel frowned. What? He tried logging into his company system. Access denied. Another message appeared. Security review in progress. Daniel's stomach tightened. Then his office phone rang. He answered quickly. Hello? His boss's voice came through the line. Daniel, my office. Now. The first crack. Daniel walked into his boss's office 10 minutes later. The room felt unusually tense. Two men he didn't recognize were standing near the desk. His boss looked furious. Sit down. Daniel obeyed. His boss threw a printed document onto the desk. Explain this. Daniel picked it up. It was a financial investigation report. His heart skipped. The document listed several questionable transactions linked to his department. Transactions Daniel had approved months earlier. Where did you get this? Daniel asked. His boss leaned forward. That's what I'd like to know. Daniel's mind raced. Someone had exposed internal company records, and only a few people could access those. Then the realization hit him. Minj, his boss continued angrily. Right now the board believes you may have violated several financial policies. Daniel shook his head quickly. That's ridiculous. Is it? Daniel stood up. This is a misunderstanding. His boss stared at him, then explained why the investigation started this morning. Daniel froze, because he knew the answer. Minj had started it, quietly, efficiently, without threats, without violence, just by exposing something Daniel thought no one would ever notice. His boss sighed. Until this is resolved, you're suspended. The word hit like a hammer. Suspended, effective immediately. Daniel felt his chest tighten. You can't do that. His boss's voice turned cold. I just did. The trap closing. Daniel walked out of the building in a daze. Everything was falling apart faster than he expected. His phone buzzed again. Another news notification. But this one made his blood run cold. The headline read, Evidence emerges that rumor campaign against designer was fabricated. Daniel opened the article quickly. Inside were screenshots, emails, digital fingerprints, proof that the accusations against Maya were fake, proof that the campaign originated from Daniel's office network, proof that Daniel himself had sent the messages. Daniel's hands began shaking. How? Then his phone rang again. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. Hello. The voice on the other end was calm. Familiar. Kong Minj speaking. Daniel closed his eyes. Of course it was. Minj continued. I gave you an opportunity. Daniel said nothing. But you chose the second option. Daniel's voice trembled slightly. What do you want? Minj replied quietly. Nothing. A pause. Everything happening now is simply the result of your own choices. Daniel's stomach twisted. Please, he said quietly. But Minj had already hung up. Daniel stood alone on the sidewalk, watching his life collapse piece by piece. And for the first time, he understood something terrifying. This wasn't revenge. It was consequences. Meanwhile, back at the penthouse, Maya looked at the news article again. They exposed everything. Minj nodded slightly. Truth tended to surface quickly when people stopped hiding it. Maya studied him. You planned all of this? Minj shrugged. I prepared. She looked out at the skyline. Is it over? Minj's eyes remained calm. Not yet. Because the truth was, Daniel had only begun to fall, and the final collapse was still coming. Daniel didn't realize how far the damage had spread until the next morning. His phone had been buzzing nonstop all night. Messages, missed calls, notifications. When he finally opened his eyes and looked at the screen, his stomach dropped. His name was everywhere. News articles, business blogs, social media threads, and every headline told the same story. Finance analyst exposed for fabricating online smear campaign. Daniel's chest tightened as he read. The article explained everything. How fake accusations had been spread about designer Maya Park. How the digital trail led back to Daniel's office network. How several anonymous sources inside the company confirmed the investigation. The final line of the article made his hand shake. Sources close to the situation say Daniel Kim may face legal consequences for defamation and professional misconduct. Daniel threw the phone onto the couch. No! He ran a hand through his hair. This can't be happening. But deep down, he knew exactly why it was happening. He had ignored the warning. The final collapse. Later that afternoon, Daniel received an email from his company. A short one, cold and professional. After reviewing the results of the internal investigation, your employment with the firm has been terminated effective immediately. Daniel stared at the screen. Fired. Just like that. 3 years of work. Gone. But the worst part wasn't losing the job. It was a realization that no other company would hire him now, because the story was spreading across the entire industry. His reputation had been destroyed, and the person responsible was technically himself. Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He had wanted to destroy Maya's life. Instead, he had destroyed his own. The confrontation. 2 days later, Daniel requested one final meeting. This time, not in anger, not in arrogance, but desperation. The meeting took place at the same penthouse, overlooking the Han River, the same room where everything had started. Daniel stood nervously near the window. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes. His confidence was gone. When Minj entered the room, Daniel immediately stood straighter. The Korean Mafia boss looked exactly the same as before. Calm, controlled, untouchable. Minj sat down and poured himself a drink. You asked for a meeting, he said quietly. Daniel nodded. Yes. What do you want? Daniel hesitated. Then he said the words he never imagined himself saying. I made a mistake. Minj took a slow sip of whiskey. That is correct. Daniel swallowed. I didn't realize how serious this would become. Minj studied him calmly. You were warned. Daniel looked down. I know. For a moment the room was silent. Then Daniel spoke again. Please stop this. Minj tilted his head slightly. Stop what? Daniel's voice cracked slightly. My life is falling apart. Minj leaned back in his chair. That tends to happen when people sabotage their own future. Daniel shook his head quickly. You could fix this. Minj's eyes grew colder. Why would I? Daniel hesitated, then answered honestly. Because I'm asking. Minj looked at him quietly. Then he said something that made Daniel realize how powerless he truly was. I didn't ruin your life. A pause. You did. Daniel had no response, because deep down, he knew it was true. The truth. Minj stood up and walked toward the window. The Seoul skyline glittered below them. 3 months ago, he said calmly, you believed Maya was beneath you. Daniel said nothing. You mocked her. Another pause. You humiliated her in public. Daniel lowered his head. Minj continued. But when she succeeded, his voice remained steady. Your pride couldn't accept it. Daniel finally looked up. I was angry. Minj nodded slightly. Yes. Then he turned toward him. But anger is not an excuse for cruelty. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Minj's voice became quieter. You had a chance to walk away. A pause. But you chose war. The words hung in the air. And Daniel suddenly understood something terrifying. Minj had never been trying to destroy him. He had simply allowed Daniel to destroy himself. The unexpected mercy. Daniel took a deep breath. What happens now? Minj considered the question. Then he walked back to the table. He placed a small document in front of Daniel. Daniel picked it up slowly. It was a legal settlement. The document required Daniel to publish a public apology and admission explaining that all accusations against Maya were false. In exchange, no further legal action would be taken. Daniel looked up. That's it. Minj nodded. That's it. Daniel blinked in disbelief. You're letting me go? Minj answered calmly. You've already suffered the consequences of your actions. Daniel exhaled slowly. Relief flooded his chest. Thank you. Minj shook his head slightly. Don't thank me. Daniel frowned. Why not? Minj looked at him quietly. Because the person you should apologize to is not me. The apology. 2 days later, the entire design industry saw Daniel's public statement. The post was simple, direct, and humiliating. He admitted that the accusations against Maya were fabricated. He explained that the rumors came from him, and he publicly apologized. For Maya, the statement closed the chapter completely. The accusations disappeared. The articles were corrected, and her reputation was stronger than ever. But Daniel's story was different, because even though he avoided legal consequences, his career was finished. No one wanted to hire someone who had tried to destroy another person's life out of jealousy. Daniel eventually left Seoul, and no one heard from him again. A quiet evening. Several weeks later, Maya stood on the same penthouse balcony overlooking the Han River. The city lights shimmered peacefully below. Minj stepped outside and joined her. It's over, she said softly. Yes. Maya looked out across the skyline. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if he had just walked away? Minj smiled slightly. Then none of this would exist. She turned toward him. What do you mean? Minj gestured toward the city. Your success. Then he looked at her. And us. Maya smiled quietly, because he was right. If Daniel had never said those cruel words in that restaurant, she might never have walked into the gala. She might never have met Kong Minj again, and her life might have remained small. Instead, everything had changed. The final lesson. Maya leaned against the balcony railing. You know what's funny? Minj raised an eyebrow. What? She laughed softly. The last thing Daniel ever said to me. Minj waited. He told me I'd never find better than him. Minj looked out across the glowing city lights. Then he said quietly, he underestimated the world. Maya smiled, because somewhere out there, Daniel had probably realized something important. The woman he believed was nothing special, had simply been waiting for the right moment to rise. And by the time he understood that truth, it was far too late.